It's strange how risk works. You rarely notice when it begins. There's no dramatic music, no flashing warning sign, no voice in your head saying, "Careful, you're drifting." It starts quietly, almost politely. A breath you don't realize changed, a muscle that tightens without permission, a thought that appears in the corner of your mind, soft enough to ignore, but sharp enough to matter. And that tiny change, the one you never feel, is the first step toward an impulsive decision that will feel sudden later, even though it wasn't sudden at all. That's the part people miss. Your risky choices don't begin in the moment you take them. They begin long before, in the shadows of your psychology, where your awareness arrives late and your impulses arrive early. AI systems have been proving this again and again. Your brain leaks signals long before you recognize anything. Micro behaviors, breathing shifts, eye dilation, finger speed, decision latency. Your body starts revealing your future actions before you consciously decide them. Imagine sitting at your desk, feeling normal, thinking straight, believing everything is under control. Then something on your screen changes, and your pupils react before you do. You inhale slightly deeper without noticing. Your attention narrows. Your shoulders lift by half an inch. Your fingers hesitate for a split second. To you, nothing happened. To an AI model, everything happened. The model reads that hesitation like a sentence. It sees the widening of your pupils like a headline. It recognizes your breathing pattern like a prediction. Your mind is preparing to do something risky, and you don't feel it. Daniel was the kind of man people described as unshakable, calm, analytical, slow to anger, the grounded voice in every room. He took pride in this. It was part of his identity, a shield he had worn for years. One afternoon, he was sitting in a small cafe, working on a project he had been battling with for months. It was the kind of project that drains you quietly, not dramatic enough to panic over, not easy enough to enjoy. He kept telling himself he was fine. He always told himself he was fine. But the details were giving him away. His jaw was tight, his breaths were shallow. His fingers hovered over keys without typing. The pressure was there, but he had learned to ignore it so deeply he couldn't recognize when it was swallowing him. Then his laptop froze. Just froze. A simple technical glitch. Nothing tragic, nothing unusual. But something inside Daniel snapped. The release he didn't know he was craving finally found an exit. He pressed a combination of keys, quickly, instinctively, blindly, and triggered a full drive format. Months of work erased in less than 10 seconds. When the screen went blank, he just stared at it, jaw loose, hands trembling. His voice was soft when he whispered, "I didn't decide that. It just happened." But it didn't just happen. AI behavioral analysis could have predicted that outburst 20 minutes before it occurred. His scrolling speed had changed. His posture had collapsed. His breathing pattern had signaled rising emotional pressure. His micro movements showed withdrawal, then agitation, then cognitive overload. The crash wasn't random. The crash was inevitable. It was a storm building silently under the surface, and Daniel only saw the lightning, never the clouds. Across the city, something similar was forming inside Maya, though her version looked completely different. Maya was 17, disciplined, careful. The kind of student teachers trusted instantly. She planned everything. She followed rules. She avoided unnecessary risks. But one night, when she was alone in her room, she downloaded an app she knew she wasn't supposed to. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't excitement. It was something else. When her parents asked her why she did it, she froze. She didn't know. Nothing about the action made sense to her. It felt detached, blurry, as if the decision didn't fully belong to her. Later, when psychologists studied behavior like hers, they uncovered a hidden truth. People often take risky actions not because they want danger, but because they want relief. Relief from pressure. Relief from guilt. Relief from anxiety. Relief from feeling trapped in expectations. And Maya had been feeling that pressure for weeks. Her emails became shorter. Her scrolling became restless. Her tapping rhythm became inconsistent. Her decision-making latency fluctuated. Her phone movements showed signs of emotional fatigue. She wasn't seeking chaos. She was seeking escape, and the risky behavior became the doorway. AI systems detect these relief-seeking signals almost instantly. Humans rarely feel them in real time. Maya didn't suddenly make a risky choice that night. The choice formed quietly over 40 minutes of emotional drift she didn't notice. Her conscious mind woke up at the end of the decision, not the beginning. And she blamed herself for something her nervous system had been building long before she clicked anything. Take a moment here. Because Daniel and Maya aren't unusual. They're mirrors. You've lived versions of their moments too. The messages you sent when you shouldn't have. The money you spent that didn't make sense. The argument you escalated too fast. The commitment you jumped into. The door you walked out of. The habit you said you'd break and didn't. The action that felt right for 1 second and wrong for weeks. They weren't random. They weren't unpredictable. They weren't you being reckless. They were patterns, invisible, repetitive patterns that form inside you long before the action ever reaches your hands. Risk isn't surprising when you understand its anatomy. There's always a trigger. There's always a drift. There's always pressure building quietly. There's always a threshold where the mind wants release. And there's always a moment where the impulse becomes louder than your logic. The action is just the final scene. The story started much earlier. AI is forcing us to confront this truth because it sees what we don't. It picks up the early signals. It predicts the drift. It identifies the shift in your state long before you do. Machines notice the beginning. Humans only notice the consequences. That's why so many people feel confused by their own decisions. They think the impulse came out of nowhere. They think they lost control. They think the risky moment appeared suddenly. But the risk was already unfolding quietly, like a wave forming far away before it reaches the shore. And that means something important, something empowering, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. If the drift begins early, you have more time to intercept it than you think. You're not a victim of your impulses. You're just unaware of their early stages. Imagine if you could sense the subtle shift before your mind tips. Imagine recognizing when your breathing changes, when your attention narrows, when the emotional pressure starts rising, when your body is reaching for relief disguised as risk. Imagine catching the moment that comes before the moment. That's the key. Not fighting the impulse when it's already loud, but noticing the whisper before it becomes a shout. This is where everything begins to change. When you learn to see what the machine sees, the micro signals, the emotional drift, the internal warning signs that are quiet but consistent. Because once you can recognize those early cues, your impulsive behavior loses its power. Your choices become clearer. Your mind stops ambushing you. Risk stops feeling like something that happens to you and starts becoming something you can navigate with awareness. This is the doorway to transformation. The moment where discomfort becomes clarity, where awareness becomes strength, where you stop being surprised by your own behavior and start understanding it deeply. Everything so far has been the foundation. The psychology beneath your impulses, the invisible patterns you've lived inside, the emotional mechanics you never learned to recognize. You're closer than you realize to breaking the pattern. Because the moment you understand that your impulses have a shape, you can finally change the way they move. Most people try to fix their impulses at the wrong stage. They wait until the behavior is already happening. They wait until their hands are already shaking. They wait until the decision is already halfway made. They wait until the emotion is louder than their logic. By then, you're fighting a fire that has already burned through half the room. The real shift happens earlier, far earlier, and it begins with learning to recognize the same early signals that AI models read effortlessly. AI doesn't get overwhelmed. AI doesn't get emotionally flooded. AI doesn't fall into the trap of reacting too late. It looks at the micro patterns and responds at the first sign of drift. Imagine giving your mind that same capability. It starts with awareness, not vague, philosophical awareness, but real, physical, measurable awareness. There's always a moment when your breathing changes, always a moment when your attention narrows in a way you don't intend. Always a moment where your thoughts start slipping into a tunnel. Always a moment where your body begins preparing for an action your logic hasn't approved yet. That's where your power is, not in the final decision, but in the spark that ignites it. Think about the last time you felt pulled towards something risky. There was a second, maybe half a second, where you felt a shift inside your chest or stomach or jaw. You might have ignored it. You might not have even noticed it, but it was there. Your body always warns you before your mind reacts. Here's the part you may not expect. Your nervous system runs ahead of your conscious thoughts by almost 7 seconds. 7 seconds is enough time to intercept a choice before it becomes a regret. 7 seconds is enough time to breathe, to pause, to shift direction. AI uses even shorter windows to make predictions. Milliseconds of data that reveal everything about your emotional state. And while you can't analyze data that fast, you can learn to recognize the feeling behind those signals. But awareness alone isn't enough. Awareness without strategy still collapses under pressure. You need something deeper, the ability to intervene inside the drift, before the drift becomes momentum. And that begins with something simple that most people overlook. Notice the pause, the tiny moment where your instinct says, move, but your hand hasn't moved yet. That moment is gold. That moment is the doorway. That moment is the exact space where change lives. AI detects that hesitation as a defining marker of state shift. Humans mistake it for confusion. It's not confusion. It's a warning. The pause means your mind is entering a risk state. And if you intercept it there, you interrupt the pattern before it becomes unstoppable. Most people don't know what to do in that pause, so they do nothing. You're not going to be one of those people anymore. Here's where the transformation begins. When the pause happens, breathe out, not in. A slow exhale. It sounds too simple, almost disappointing in its simplicity, but it's not. Breathing out tells your nervous system that it doesn't need to react quickly. It forces your brain to reevaluate the situation. It stops the emotional software from running autopilot. AI has a similar reset mechanism. When prediction confidence drops, it reassesses. Your nervous system works the same way. Try this for a moment. Think of the last impulsive decision you made. Imagine if, at the exact second before it happened, you had exhaled instead of leaning into the pressure. Everything would have changed in that 1 second. Everything. That's the first shift, learning to use the pause. But the second shift is even more powerful. You need to recognize your personal risk signature. AI models learn your patterns by observing hundreds of tiny behaviors. You only need to observe 3. Your breathing pattern, your attention pattern, your emotional motive pattern. Your breathing changes first. Your attention becomes narrow next. Your motive becomes relief-seeking last. When all 3 line up, your brain is preparing to act impulsively. Your job is to learn the shape of those 3 patterns in your own body. This isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about identifying the early version of the emotion, the quiet version, the version that hasn't taken control yet. For some people, the breathing shift feels like heat rising under the ribs. For others, attention narrowing feels like the world suddenly becoming too loud or too silent. For others, the emotional motive feels like wanting to get something over with quickly. Everyone's signature is different, but once you learn yours, you will never fall into impulsive behavior blindly again. Here's the part that surprises most people. Your risk signature is consistent. It repeats. It doesn't change from year to year. It doesn't evolve with age. It's rooted in your nervous system. Daniel's signature was jaw tension, shallow breathing, and attention collapse. Maya's signature was restless scrolling, inconsistent tapping rhythm, and emotional withdrawal. Yours is there too. You just haven't named it yet. And the moment you name it, you take away its power. Now imagine combining this awareness with one more principle. The same principle AI models use to stabilize predictions when uncertainty rises. Interrupt the loop. AI interrupts loops by injecting a new variable. You interrupt loops by injecting a new behavior. Something tiny. Something small enough not to trigger resistance, but big enough to break the momentum. Walk to the door. Splash water on your face. Look out the window. Change your physical posture. Say one sentence out loud. This is the drift. That sentence alone breaks the trance. It pulls your mind out of autopilot and back into control. Try it. The next time you feel the drift beginning, whisper it, just enough to hear your own voice. This is the drift. 3 words that change the direction of your psychology. Now let's address something deeper. Something you've always felt, but maybe never understood. Risk-taking isn't the problem. Impulse isn't the problem. Your desire for relief isn't the problem. The problem is the blindness. The moment you start seeing the drift, the entire emotional architecture inside you shifts. You stop fearing your impulses and start anticipating them. You stop feeling out of control and start leading your own decisions. You stop seeing risk as a danger and start seeing it as data. AI treats risk as information. You will too. Now imagine something bigger. Imagine combining all these pieces into one identity, one way of living. The version of you who no longer gets pulled by invisible forces. The version of you who recognizes emotional drift before it hijacks your behavior. The version of you who treats impulses the way AI treats predictions, with awareness, precision, calm detachment. That version of you exists. It's not a fantasy. It's not a dramatic transformation. It's a shift in perception, a subtle rewiring of how you interpret your own emotional signals. The moment you start seeing your impulses as patterns instead of problems, everything changes. You become the person who doesn't fall into the same traps anymore. You become the person who sees danger before it becomes real. You become the person who moves through pressure without collapsing under it. And slowly, naturally, effortlessly, you become the person who makes decisions from awareness, not desperation. That's the identity shift. Not a new personality, but a new level of awareness. And if you want to deepen that identity, then say this to yourself right now, quietly, deliberately, with intention. I lead my impulses. They don't lead me. Say it again, because your brain listens when the words come from your own voice. Your nervous system responds when the message is repeated. Your decisions change when your identity changes first. Before we finish, take a moment. Notice your breathing. Notice your shoulders. Notice your mind. Right now, you are more aware than you were an hour ago. More in control. More conscious of what drives you. More capable of recognizing the drift when it begins. That already changes the choices you'll make tonight, tomorrow, next week. And if this helped you understand yourself a little more, if it made you think, if it made you aware of something you've never noticed before, then stay connected. Leave a comment. Tell me which part hit you the hardest. Share this with someone who needs more control over their impulses. Subscribe if you want more deep psychology and AI breakdowns like this. And keep this video in your saved list, because you'll need it again when the drift tries to pull you.